Have you ever had a friend that constantly assumed that you were pulling away, even when you weren't? They overanalyze your tone, get hurt when you take time for yourself, assume that distance means rejection, need constant reassurance that you still do care about them. And no matter how loyal you are to them, it never feels like enough. Sometimes what you're dealing with is not selfishness or drama. Sometimes you're dealing with somebody who is just projecting their fear of abandonment onto you. And if you don't understand what's going on, then you can slowly start carrying emotional responsibilities that were never yours to begin with. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, I'm Sky, and here I like to do a little bit of whatever inspires me. So if you end up enjoying the video, feel free to like and subscribe. And yeah, let's just get right into the video. When someone has unresolved abandonment wounds, either from childhood, past relationships, friendships, or past experiences with betrayal, they may become hypersensitive to any inkling of emotional distance. A delayed text can feel like rejection. A boundary can feel like betrayal. And your independence can feel like proof that you are leaving them. And because those fears feel emotionally very real, they sometimes project that fear outwards. Instead of the person saying, "I'm afraid of being abandoned," it sometimes comes out as, "You're leaving me. You don't care about me anymore. You've changed. You're replacing me, or I guess I matter less to you now." And over time, that emotional pressure can feel very, very draining for the people around them. Projection tied to abandonment can show up very subtly at first. Maybe your friend becomes upset when you hang out with other people, interprets neutral behavior as negative, gets emotionally reactive to small changes, or assumes that distance is being created where none exists. You can take longer to respond one day, and suddenly they think that you're mad at them. You can focus on work, your family, or your own mental health, and they take that as emotional withdrawal. The difficult part is that these emotions are genuinely sincere. They genuinely feel abandoned, but something to keep in mind is feelings are not always accurate representations of reality. And if somebody never learns to separate fear from fact, they can unintentionally create very draining dynamics within their relationships. The problem with projected abandonment fears is that it slowly turns the friendship into emotional surveillance. You begin monitoring your tone, your response time, your availability, your wording, and even your boundaries because you're trying to avoid triggering anxiety in the other person. And after a while, you stop feeling emotionally relaxed around this person, and instead you start feeling responsible for their reactions and their emotions. And this is an enormous kind of burden on any friendship, especially since no amount of reassurance can permanently fix unresolved abandonment wounds. You can reassure somebody for hours, but they might still panic the next time you need space. Not because they're manipulative necessarily, but because reassurance cannot permanently heal a wound that they have not addressed themselves. And this is where a lot of very caring people burn out emotionally. They confuse compassion with emotional over-responsibility. Ironically, and honestly very sadly, fear of abandonment sometimes creates the very thing that the person is afraid of. When someone constantly questions your loyalty, assumes the worst about you, reacts intensely to normal distance, needs endless reassurance, or makes you feel guilty for having a life outside of that friendship, the relationship can start feeling very emotionally suffocating. Not because you stopped caring suddenly or you're this like cold-hearted person all of a sudden, but because the relationship no longer feels safe or evenly balanced. And eventually people just start creating distance in order to just simply breathe. And that distance then confirms that person's fear. So they become even more anxious, which creates even more pressure, which creates even more distance. It becomes a painful cycle, and oftentimes both parties end up hurting from it. One person feels abandoned and the other feels emotionally trapped. And it is very important for me to say this here, that having abandonment wounds does not mean you're a bad person or that you are like this energy sucker, because a lot of like deeply loving and wonderful people deal with these fears on the daily. So this conversation is really not about judging other people or deeming people that had trauma or just really awful life experiences as awful people. It's about recognizing unhealthy dynamics and behaviors before it consumes a friendship. Empathy should not require self-abandonment. You can care about somebody so deeply and still acknowledge that the way that they are treating you, regardless of where it comes from really, is still having a negative impact on you. And if you constantly sacrifice your own peace to prevent somebody else's anxiety, eventually resentment starts forming. And that's not healthy for either party. So how do you deal with a situation like this? First, you need to stop accepting responsibility for emotions that you did not create. You are responsible for being honest, respectful, and caring. You are responsible for your own actions. You are not responsible for eliminating every other fear or insecurity another person might feel. Second, you need to communicate clearly instead of compensating. Sometimes people start performing emotional labor constantly, either over-explaining, over-reassuring, and over-apologizing. But endless reassurance can sometimes accidentally reinforce the anxiety instead of curing it long-term. Healthy reassurance sounds like, "I really care about you and I don't want you to feel these emotions, but I need space sometimes." Not, "I will continually abandon myself just to prove that I'm loyal to you." Third, really pay attention to if the person takes accountability for their fears. Emotionally mature people eventually come to the point where they acknowledge the fact that like, hey, this reaction is coming from my fears. And that self-awareness can really change everything. But if somebody continually blames you for their emotions that are rooted in their own lived experiences, the relationship can become very unhealthy very, very, very quickly. And lastly, and I think most importantly, do not confuse boundaries with cruelty. Do not confuse boundaries with you being mean. You are allowed to take time. You are allowed to have friendships outside of this friendship. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to do all of these things. Just take time for your mental health. Those things are so important, and it's not cruel to set those boundaries. I say this all the time. Boundaries are supposed to be bridges, not walls. So if somebody takes it as a wall, then that boundary is very, very, very necessary. Speaking from experience, no amount of empathy, like you can be the kindest person on the planet and they can still take a lot of your actions as a threat to their relationship with you. And it's simultaneously frustrating because of your own experience with the pressure from it. But it's also like very sad to watch because this is obviously a person that you love going through it. Like this is somebody that you love and care for. So watching them constantly fear that you are leaving them when your heart is pure in this, it's very heartbreaking, not even just like in an ego sense to where it's like they're questioning your loyalty so it hurts your feelings, but it's also like you're watching somebody that you truly do care about and love so deeply be constantly fearful of you leaving them. So they're always in emotional distress. It's like so heartbreaking to watch happen. And there is a lot of empathy required in this process. So I don't want to say that like there's none and like the people that are fearing this abandonment are awful people, because they are not. It's very much like a multi-layered situation to where somebody's actions can be completely valid and be a completely like reasonable part of how they grew up. It makes total sense why they're like this because they experienced X, Y, or Z. But those experiences can only explain why they were there. It doesn't excuse the harm that it's doing to the other person. And I know for me, when I was in this kind of situation, it was so hard to just like find time for myself because I never made a boundary. It's just heartbreaking to like look back on that because it's rooted in such a cloud of self-abandonment and just emotional exhaustion. Not to put all of that on the other person because like obviously like it takes a person speaking up to end the cycle a little bit. But it's like, it's so hard to like look back on, you know? A healthy friendship can survive individuality, and in fact, a real one requires it. Relationships cannot stay healthy when one person constantly has to feel responsible over proving that they will not leave the other person. Real friendships need trust, breathing room, and accountability, along with the understanding that temporary distance is not the same as abandonment. You should not have to shrink your life just to be able to accommodate to somebody else's fears. And the right relationships will allow both closeness and freedom. I wanted to make a video on this because I feel like there's a lot of videos out there talking about how people can cope with the fear of abandonment and for like that party, but there's not a lot out there for people that are dealing with that fear being projected onto them, and it is really suffocating as well. So I wanted to make this just for like the people that are dealing with that. And overall, it's just a very interesting dynamic. It's full of like a lot of very chaotic emotions. So it's very, very, very multifaceted. So if I didn't talk about a certain aspect of it that you're thinking about, that's just because I didn't get to it. There are so many parts, so many moving parts to this kind of conversation. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, feel free to like and subscribe, and let me know if there are any topics that you guys would like me to cover to the best of my ability down below by leaving a comment. And yeah, I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.